excited to bring a dear friend of mine onto the podcast today. This is Garland Brinkley, and he is running for State Assembly District 1. But Garland comes with so much information. He is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the money business, only because he's spent so much time as a economics professor, and he also has a degree in public health. And he's just a wealth of knowledge, and I felt like it would be such a great experience, and I wanted to share with the viewers this conversation, because he and I got into a conversation a couple weeks ago, and I was like, I got to have you on the podcast. So, I want to just have you talk a little bit about yourself and your background, Garland, and then we're going to get into kind of the state of affairs with Americans not using common sense when it comes to finances. It's just not so common anymore, common sense. So, Garland, if you want to just share a little bit about yourself.
Okay. As you said, I have a doctorate in economics. I've been teaching economics at the university level for over 30 years. And this includes UC Berkeley, UC Davis, different community colleges. And I've done public health and epi and biostats, epidemiology and biostatistics. Also, and again, for almost the same length of time, I've done a lot of consulting work also as the cost-benefit analysis, because with government grants, you have to have that component. So I've done a lot of that also. Mm-hmm. So I actually went to college. I worked for civil service, the state of California, for about 20 years. Needed to get a degree to go higher. And I went back to school, and what was nice was the state paid for my school. So they paid for the classes, they reimbursed me, and this included the books that they paid for. And so I went in the evening mostly. Once in a while I got a day class, but mostly evening. Got my bachelor degree, and then saw I like going to school. It beat working for the state. So then I went and got my PhD, and this was after I was 30 years old. I mean, it's like I was just about 40 when I went to graduate school.
Well, and we were talking about that earlier, and this is where I wanted to kind of take this conversation, because what we're finding right now, and we were talking about student loans and the state of affairs with what we're looking at with the debt in this country. Currently today, 1 in 3 Americans has a student loan. We are over $1.7 trillion in debt. And what this next generation doesn't realize is they have been enslaved. Debt is slavery, and we have enslaved a whole generation. Millennials on down. And, when Garland and I were talking earlier, he was working for a company, he was working for the state, and they said, if you want to go to school, we will pay for it. So why in the world would you go to college and take out a loan when you could actually get somebody else to pay for your schooling? Or, back in the day when I was coming up, we paid as we went. And I was not going to go into debt. So I was working 3 jobs when I went to college. And a lot of people today, they want things right now. They are not willing to wait, not willing to have patience. But I'm telling you, if you're coming out of school and your income level is $50,000 a year and you're making $50,000, you have $50,000 in debt, those numbers do not pencil. And so I wanted to kind of, talk about this today, because if we're going to pressure our children to go to college, you need to pencil the numbers. And, Garland, do you want to add to this, like what this looks like? Because, we were just talking about this. If you're going to come out of school to be a teacher and you're making $50,000 a year and you have $50,000 worth of student loans, if your student loan compounds daily, you will still owe $50,000 in 20 years. You're never going to be able to pay it down. There's not enough money to do that unless you're renting a room and living with somebody. Am I right?
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very difficult with student loans because you don't want to take it out if you don't have to. One of the classes I taught was investments, and this was at UC Davis. And so in investments, of course, we look at the investment, how much money you put up, and the return you get. Education can be a great investment, especially if you're not putting too much money up or someone else can pay for it.
Yes.
And that's ideally what you want to do.
That's the military GI Bill, working for any state. I think we just said we think like a lot of companies like Costco and McDonald's, will pay for school. I mean, what is wrong with going to work at McDonald's, making $50,000 a year, because you can make $50,000 a year at McDonald's, and let McDonald's pay for your education? I mean, it's just that some people aren't willing to make sacrifices to do that. I mean, that's going to look like maybe working 6 years and going to school, but as you get out, if you're walking out of school with no debt, you've been in school 6 years, but you're walking out with no debt, you're far ahead of the person that did it in 4 years and are walking out with $50,000 in debt. Can you explain why?
Oh, sure. Again, it's investment. It's the money that you put up versus the return. So if you go not working, paying for college, you get out and you have basically you're starting below break even. It's like $50,000 down. You have to earn that back, and not just earn it back, but get a good return on it.
Yes.
With compound interest daily, which is amazing if you're earning it, not if you're paying it.
Thank you.
It's like,
that's a big difference.
And if you can, like I said, get someone else to pay for it, it may take longer. You may miss college experience, fraternities, sororities, whatever. But it's like, this is your life. You don't have to go when you're 18 or 19. I didn't go to college until I was like 35. And so, and even after that, going to college, graduate school, I still taught for 30 years after that, over 30 years after that, at the university level.
And I have a dear, dear friend that went back to college. She studied online and got her doctorate degree at age 60. So there's no rule of thumb to this, but I just find that people aren't thinking this through. And even when I was time for me to go to college, it wasn't unusual for us to borrow money. If we were going to go to college, we would borrow money from a family member. And this was back in the day when student loans weren't compounding daily. They weren't nearly as egregious as what they are today, but it wasn't unusual to borrow money from an Aunt Jean, and she was like and maybe you didn't even pay it back with interest, but maybe they'd borrow you $10,000 and you just had to make the payments until it was paid off. And God help you if you didn't pay it back,
Family pressure.
Right.
Yes.
But there's just so many avenues that we can do it rather than, doing the standard, get out of college and go right to a state school or a high-end school. Like I tell people all the time when I'm coaching them, especially clients that I'm helping them with their finances, and they're like, well, we can't retire or can't save money for retirement. We've got, our son is going to go to UNR or state of Arizona. And I'm like, okay, please explain to me why he needs to go right from high school directly to state of Arizona, which is like $35,000 a year. Why can't your son go to CCSN for 2 years, which is probably $8,000 to $10,000 a year?
Yep.
Okay, and then go to University of Arizona. So if the school is $35,000 a year versus $8,000, the bottom line is when you're looking for a job, the company that's looking at your resume only sees where you graduated. They don't see that you went to 2 years at CCSN or 2 years at UNLV or 2 years at UNR and then you went on to Harvard. They only see that you're a Harvard graduate. So why would you pay all that money? So I'm literally saving them like literally $60,000 for 2 years of school. It's where you finish. And it's amazing how many people do not know this. What are you doing? You're throwing money away.
And businesses don't look at your GPA.
No.
They don't care. Okay, you got a diploma. It's there. You graduated. That's what they care about.
Right.
It shows that you have the persistence, if you will, to go to college, finish it, complete it, get the diploma. But you do not need to spend, like I said, 4 years at a university. I'm a big fan of community college.
Yes.
Absolutely.
It's the same education. I'm
Yes.
sorry. I've been to community college, state college. It's all the same education. And again, another point to this, when Obama federalized student loans in 2008, what did schools do? They jacked their prices up 100%. So we are not getting 100% better education. It's just costing 100% more than it used to. Inflation is not normal inflation when it comes to universities.
No.
So where we go to school is really, really important, and where we finish is really important. It's not the fact that you went 4 years at Harvard. Okay, I've had people that went 2 years community college, 1 year state, and then wrapped up and finished their last year at Harvard and then got a master's at Harvard.
Yep.
So it's always what the bottom line, what that certificate says at the end. Okay.
Yes.
Now I want to also mention something. I've been an employer for years. When I had my mortgage company, I had about 85 loan officers and 15 people on staff just to support those loan officers. And I used to, hire constantly. I was always looking for people. And as a very busy CEO and drowning in work and needing help right away, my biggest concern when I would look at a resume was their experience. I did not care, quite honestly, if they had a college degree, because it really didn't help me in my day-to-day. Like, what did a college degree do? So you have a bachelor's degree in arts or a bachelor's degree in finance. When you're coming into a mortgage business, I need to know that you're sharp, you use your common sense, and you can work quickly. I could have cared less if they had a degree. And so for the people that I was hiring, I think we were bringing them in at maybe $35,000 to $50,000 a year. It would have been the same had they had a degree or not. So what do you have to say about that? Because, so many people push college on kids, and I'm like, you don't need college to learn how to think.
No, you don't. And the college that we teach and we graduate from, it doesn't mean you know how you have good work ethic, although it tends to say that. Okay, this is something you stuck to for 4 years to get that 4-year degree. So we do have that, but you can demonstrate that in other ways. You graduate from college and you went right out of high school, you have no work experience.
Yes.
You're lucky if you had some work study or something like that where you worked a few hours or stuff. Ideally, to me, you go to college, you do 2 years at community college, you're working part-time then.
Yes.
Finishing that up, then go into the 4-year degree, and a lot of universities and colleges have transfer agreements. So you're guaranteed admittance into the 4-year graduate program. And when you do that, then you've got the 2 years covered. You do the not so much student loans, but you try and get the grants. You work part-time, you pay that. And then you go the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And then, so it does show that you can maintain a goal, if you will.
Right.
And so that's what's valuable about it. Not so much the kind of degree, unless it's one of the STEMs.
Right.
It's like technology.
Explain STEMs for people that may not understand what you're
science,
talking about.
technology, engineering, and math. If you have those degrees in those areas, you're paid far more than if you have it in psychology or art appreciation. And because that's where the money is in the working world.
Yeah.
Like I said, computers, technology, science, is lots of money there. And if you want to go to graduate school, that's what you want.
Yeah.
Because there's a huge return. If I remember what I read recently was that the average STEM graduate from college makes $100,000 more than other college graduates. So
that's a great return on investment.
Oh, fantastic.
But again, what I'm concerned with the state of affairs with America right now is we have had kids, it's beat into their head that go to college or you're not going to amount to anything. If you don't go to college, you're not going to have a hope and a prayer, which couldn't be further from the truth. And I'm going to share a brief story. I met with a young lady this week. She asked me to help her with her finances and get her squared away on her money. She's 24 years old, did not go to college. Her parents about lost their mind when she said, she started in, I think she went 6 months and said, this isn't for me. And her parents just about lost their minds when she dropped out of school. Right now, and then she went right in, she was working for a technology firm. She started in as an assistant, and now she's been with them 6 years. She's making $175,000 a year. and she has stock in the company. When that company goes public, she'll be a multimillionaire because she's been with them. They're a startup. She's been with them since the jump. She's helped them make a lot of money. She's very, very good at what she does, but she stuck to it and practiced, and she was just really, really good at it. And a friend took her under his wing and she taught her everything he knew. And I mean, literally what she would have learned in 6 years in school, he taught her in maybe 6 months. This girl is making $175,000 a year without college education. And here's the deal. Every single one of her friends have graduated college. They're making, a lot of them are working at Starbucks because they can't find a job because they didn't have any work experience.
Right.
And they're making $40,000 a year and carrying $60,000 plus in student loan debt. It's disgusting. And they're always borrowing money from her. And I'm like, she's so brilliant. But I loved the fact that she was like, college is not for me. And I am not going to go into debt to do this. It didn't make sense to her. And I'm like, oh my God, you're a unicorn. She really is, because she was actually practicing common sense on how is this going to work for me. So I want kids to know, like this future generation, that do not think that college is your only way to get successful. You don't need somebody to teach you how to think.
No.
You can think for yourself. I think that public school system is unfortunately teaching children not to think,
I don't argue that whatsoever. In my opinion, community colleges gives you a better education than the larger colleges, the 4-year schools. And I've taught at both.
And why do you think that?
Well, classes are smaller. For one thing, it's like I've taught over 10,000 students.
Okay.
And I have class sizes of 800. So
Wow.
I'm up here talking, microphone, I can't even see the students out there, 800 students sitting out there. Common size was 400. It's like, do you think there's any kind of interaction, anything like that with me and the students? It's like, no. Community colleges, you have maybe 20,
Right.
maybe 30 students. It depends on what the class is. You can have even less than that. You can have interaction with the faculty,
Yeah.
and that's what you want to do, is talk to them. With your life, you want to look at investment.
Yeah.
Invest in yourself, because that stays with you, right?
Yeah.
And so education may work, depends what you want to do, while you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. College may be one of it, it may not. College is not for everybody.
It's just not.
It's not. It's like working with your hands or a trade. I think that's wonderful. We have brilliant examples of people that have done trade rather than the education or the college.
Yes.
And they've done fantastic.
Yes.
As successful businesses, you work hard. So it's the investment in yourself.
Yeah.
It may be college. Look at that. It doesn't have to be immediate. You just have to make sure that you improve yourself over time.
Well, and there's another part to that, like with the trades. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to bring that alive too, is plumbers, electricians. Employers will pay for you to get your college. It's work experience. So my ex-husband, he lost his job when we were very, very young. We married young, and he had a great job working for Precision Cast Parts up in Portland, Oregon, and they casted the parts for Boeing. Well, he had that lifetime job, it would have been the lifetime career, but, they downsized, and he was panicking, and he said, well, maybe I'll go into plumbing. So for him to graduate the plumbing program, it was a 4-year program. And we were like, how are we going to pay for this? Well, when we did the research, they're like, no, you come to work for us. We teach you. We pay for your school. So yes, he had to go to school at night, but it was relevant only to plumbing.
Right.
But every single thing was paid by his employer. And even when we transferred from Portland, Oregon to here, pretty much everything transferred. And from almost the day he got out, he worked his way. I think he started the first year, he made $100,000. But by the time he sold his company, he was making $350,000 a year. But he didn't pay $1 for his education. There is a lot to be said for trades, plumbing, electrical work, and people are desperate for that. Electricians, the electrical companies pay for your degree. How powerful is that? But most people don't know that there's a different avenue, and you're never going to make less than 6 figures as a plumber and electrician. It's just not going to happen.
True. There's one person I follow on Facebook, and actually what he is a handyman, and he makes $1,000 a day.
Yes.
I mean, it's like, and people call him, he's booked up, he just can't handle everything. It's like people that don't want to hang a light fixture.
Yes.
It's like $150 to come out and do that.
Yeah.
Less than an hour.
Right.
If you know what you're doing, you're skilled at it, you have the tools for it. It's like,
my handyman is egregiously expensive.
I know, but he's good.
But I wouldn't have a light fixture if it weren't for him. So I'm happy to pay. Like, he deserves to make what he makes.
Sure.
He's very, very good at what he does, and he doesn't have a college education.
Nope.
But I think it has to do with the stigma too. I have to say that our parents' generation were so about, when you came out of blue collar and you were blue collar, people that had the degrees were the ones making the extra money.
Sure.
But this was, back in the 50s and 60s, when I came up, everyone was like, oh yeah, you're going to get your college education, right? And I'm like,
you get it.
I guess, I was always told I wouldn't amount to anything if I didn't go to school. So I was one of those people that dropped out. I went to community school for 2 years, dropped out, and my whole family practically disowned me. They were just like, oh, you're like the black sheep now. And I went out and made my way, and my whole family is always amazed that I'm the one in our family that's made more than all of them combined, and with all their master's degrees and all that, because I didn't need a professor to tell me how to think.
Right.
I just would figure stuff out. And a lot of this too, I think college comes from, I'm so fearful. I have fear and I don't know what to do, so let me just go to college and I'll try to figure it out from there. But what if you didn't have any fear? What if you just knew it was all gonna work out?
Yeah, and I think I told you earlier, I've taught in Ethiopia and in Africa, and it's like the difference in what you have there versus here, what we have here is just so tremendous.
Yes.
And so it's like we can live far cheaper than we do. We don't need to have the latest iPhone or the latest anything, or the newest car, nothing like that. And we can live just fine with that. Life isn't about the money. It's about your relationships.
Yep.
I think I said earlier that when you're on your deathbed, you're not thinking about, I had the Mercedes and I had the super kitchen, and that's not what you think about. You think about your kids, your brothers and sisters you didn't talk to and you should have talked to.
Yes.
You should have related to them. That's what's important. The family, how your life went, the investments you've made in yourself, because that goes with you.
Yes.
Real estate, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, that doesn't, and that can go away. I won't mention the government here.
In a moment. Yep. It can all be gone seconds flat. I look at all the things that I put such a value on in my 30s, and and yes, I needed to provide for my kids and everything, but there's so many things that can bring us joy, and people get so tied up, and they're so we get into this rut of this one way of thinking, and I'm like, what if it's more than that? And I talked the other day about prosperity, and being prosperous doesn't necessarily mean you're rich in your bank account.
Right.
There's a million different ways to have prosperity,
Absolutely. It's yourself, it's your family. And what I like to see is you sit down and make a 5-year plan. What do you see yourself in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years? It's especially valuable for young people to do that.
Yeah.
It's like, it doesn't have to be I'm 18, I've got to go to college now, and that's 22 when I graduate. And it's like, think it through. Do the numbers.
I've had this conversation with my son multiple times. He's 21 this year. But he was one of those, he's a kinesthetic learner, and a kinesthetic is, touch, hands-on, and he didn't do well in the public school system because public schools teach mostly visual or auditory.
Right.
So the kinesthetic, the person that needs to learn by doing, falls through the cracks. And so we were constantly told that he was dumb, or he didn't know what he was doing, or he wasn't applying himself. No, he was simply so disillusioned with learning because they could not teach him the way that he learned, which is so sad. And we're teaching all the kids the same, but we're not all the same. We're not robots. And so finally, when I pulled him out of high school because I was so tired of the mental abuse that was really going on. And I said, son, here's what we're going to do. You're 18. At this rate, you'll finish at age 20, 21 from high school. That's not even good for your psyche. I knew it wasn't. And he went to work for a family friend that's an electrician. He soared in that industry because electrical work is hands-on. And he, like, it was like a switch flipped on. Like, he was like, oh my gosh. He became so good at what he did. And he, you know, yes, there was a learning curve to try to learn all that, but it was an amazing, like, the light bulb went on. Like, he was actually excelling at what he did instead of all these years of school of they're trying to teach him one way that he doesn't learn that way. And this is the concern that I have with the state of education. You know, that's that part. But the conversation I had with him is, you know, when he was 18, is I said, look, you're 18. You can do whatever you want. You can go to work at McDonald's. Let's say you don't like that. Now you want to go into retail. You go to work at Nordstrom. You don't like that. Go into something else. You just keep working until you find something that you like. And then when you find a job that you love, guess what? You pour your heart into it because you love it. And guess what? The dollars follow.
Yes.
And this is what now, so I tell him now he's going into a new career. He's going into the cannabis industry.
Okay.
He's all licensed and ready to go. And he's super excited about that. And I'm like, well, if that's what you want to do, you're only 21. If you hate that, you can go into something else. Like, there's no rule of thumb. Youth has time. Now, if he's 35 and he's having that issue, we got a problem then. But when you're that young, there's no time frame. You know?
True. Well, even at 35, you have time because that's when I did college.
Right.
But like with school, with public school, when my son was, I think, in the 6th grade, we had transferred him from a private school to public school, and the teacher there had him doing column addition, and he was doing poorly at it. We'd talked to the teacher several times because she thought she was a professional and knew, you know, child development and stuff. He was bored.
Yes.
So after about 6 months, she finally moved him to the advanced group. He did great. It's like the parents know the kids best.
Yes.
You know, far more than anyone, because this is not bashing the teachers in the classroom, but they, you know,
they're being told what to teach, and the problem is you can't just teach everybody that way, and they're kind of stuck, and they're not using their common sense. Like, how am I going to get this kid to understand this?
Yes.
And I have a similar story. My son was in fifth or sixth grade, and he was effing math all the way through. It was F's, and he just wasn't grasping it. And so finally I hired a tutor. We got the tutor to the house, and she sat down and asked him. She gave him a problem to do, and she set him down, and he was just so, like, I could tell he was just, it was like he was shell-shocked because he'd been in so much trouble. And I said, son, just do your best. Mm-hmm. So he wrote down the answer. He just wrote it down. And she said, well, that's really interesting, son. Do you know there's 7 ways to solve that problem? And I'm watching this whole thing, and I looked at how he solved it, and I go, yeah, that's the answer. That's how I would have solved it. Yep. She goes, actually, that's the short form. You knew the answer. You put the answer down. She goes, this is why he's failing math. He's not taking the long approach and showing all his work and everything. But when you have somebody that's so brilliant and just shows the answer, they're being made wrong for that. And here's my problem with that. I get why they're doing it, because we need to know how you got to that answer. But what if it doesn't matter? See, as an employer, I don't care how you got to the answer. I care that you got the work done and you're moving on to the next one. So for me, we're creating dum-dums going into the workplace. Like, I don't want you to take the long way to solve a problem when I'm paying you hourly. I want you to get through it quick. I want you to be on your feet using your common sense. This is so backwards what we're doing.
Oh, agreed. And it's like the school district, like I said, 30-some years of teaching, I've watched the quality of students coming out. And it's like I have 18-year-olds in my classes, things like that. And the ability for them to perform academics has gotten lower and lower and lower. And it's like one thing I want to do as the assembly person is to change that.
Yeah.
And the way
How will you do that?
competition. I mean,
Okay.
you ever heard of the thing called the Olympics?
Yeah.
Okay. You know, it's like you have people compete against each other. You get better. They both get better. Competition. The money has to follow the student.
Okay.
So if there's alternatives to the public school, I'll say monstrosity we have here,
Yes.
300,000 students, and most school districts are under 20,000. They're not responsive to the parents or the students or anyone.
Right.
And so if we can take the money that we give to or is being spent on the student and they decide, the parents decide where it goes. Homeschooling,
Yes.
charter school, private school, anything like that, the schools will improve dramatically.
Beautiful.
And it's like, it doesn't take much. That we can do in the assembly
All right.
and take care of that. Now, in 2015, a bill was passed. I think it's 394, but don't quote me on that. And this was to break up or rearrange the school district
Yes.
here in
Into
Clark
smaller
County.
chunks.
And it's like, so at the beginning
That was
of this,
voted down.
no, it's still going on.
Okay.
But the Board of Trustees here in Clark County just sued to stop it. It's like,
They want the money. That's what
well,
it's
well,
about.
that, and also their excuse in the paper was, well, they didn't take our concerns into consideration. This has been going on for 7 years. It's like, did you call them?
Right.
Did you talk to them? Did you try and work with them?
Yeah,
No.
50. We're 50th in the country now
Yeah.
as far as quality.
Oh,
it's
it's like-
horrible. We're in dead last place for quality of education
Yeah.
and
it's
graduate
like,
levels.
It's not going to help Las Vegas and this Las Vegas Valley to have a poorly educated workforce. Businesses won't come here.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, it all
So you're-
trickles down. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The education of our children is so critical. So I want to add to that too. So State Assembly District 1, Garland, can you tell us where is District 1?
okay, mostly North Las Vegas.
Okay.
I mean, there's boundaries. It's not the entire part of it. It basically goes from Commerce, I'll say Craig, although it's more like Lone Mountain, and goes up, kind of stair steps on like Valley and Allen and Simmons Road, up to 215.
Okay.
So it's that area there. Then I have a section that's stuck out, love reapportionment.
Okay.
That actually is way up. Takes Iron Mountain,
Okay.
so it's let me think. Grand Teton, Jones, and Aliante Parkway.
Okay.
So it's that section
Clear
up there.
Okay. So I want to add to this, if you guys are going to get out there and vote, which I hope you will, vote for Garland Brinkley. He's State Assembly District 1. Remember, Garland's number 1. If you want to
I'm
remember,
number 1.
he's number
Yes.
1. And if you want to remember him, he's going to change the state of affairs when it comes to education, not only public education, but I think this is going to trickle up to the colleges as well. So, Garland, I just want to thank you for being here today. This has been amazing. Thank you for your contribution.
Absolutely.
We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. I'm more than happy to come back. If
We'd
you need-
love to have you back.
Okay.
You know?
And it's like, lots more stories. 30
Yeah.
years of teaching, lots of them.
Yeah. So thank you for joining in today, Cindy Birkland, cindybirkland.com. If this has interested you and you want to hear more about how we can get your kid into school for the least amount of money and the most common sense, hit me up at cindybirkland.com.
And I am at brinkleyfornevada.com.
Okay, got it.